Well, good morning. I'm going to show you how I make my best ever banana muffins. And yeah, it's a really good recipe. Seems to be almost foolproof. Just follow the simple steps and we'll get them made for back to school lunches, coffee breaks, dessert, whatever you need it for that day. My recipe calls for 3 large bananas. And as you can see, these guys, they're still good and edible, but they're also at the perfect stage for baking. All them brown spots on them mean it's full of sugar. So it makes a nicer and sweeter banana muffin. You know those green ones can be quite sour. And even though there's a bit of bruise, I'm okay with that because it'll just get mashed in. It doesn't change the flavor. The price of groceries these days, folks, we really have to be a little bit more thrifty and maybe even a little more humble. Anyways, I'm going to get a fork and mash these up. I'll bring you back. Alright, so it calls for 1/2 cup of sugar. My sugar is kind of a yellowy brown because I use an organic sugar, but that's just me. If you want to use just a regular white sugar, feel free. I'm going to stir that in and get it mixed up. I think that looks all right. Now, as you can see, the banana's got a little more creamy just because the sugar was added. All right, it calls for 1 egg. So let's put the egg in. And we've got a spatula. We want all of that in there. And we'll beat that around. You do most of your mixing right now, folks, because once you put the flour in, you only just want to fold it nice and neat or nice and slow and not beat it because it'll make your batter very tough. All right, so after we get the 1 egg in there, then I'm going to add my 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And I'm going to add my melted butter. 1/3 cup of melted butter. You can use oil, veg oil in this, but the consistency and texture and flavor with the butter, you can't change that, folks. It really does take the butter to make these the best ever banana muffins. Give that a light mix. And then we're going to add our flour. Okay, so I'm going to add my walnuts in there. I have 3/4 cup of walnuts. The walnuts are high in omega fatty acid 3. So they're really quite a good benefit to putting walnuts in there. If your kids don't like them, we'll put blueberries or something, frozen blueberries, whatever, or don't put anything in. 1.5 cups of flour. Now I like to put my baking soda and my baking powder on top of the flour because if you put it in too early, it activates and then you lose all your poofiness of your baking powder. So 1 teaspoon of baking powder and 1/2 teaspoon, no, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, 1 teaspoon of baking powder. That's right. Okay. So we're just going to fold these together and we're just going to blend it until it's all moistened. Which only takes a few minutes until all of the dry flour is gone. Make sure to get off the bottom. It likes to stick in the bottom creases of your bowl. All right, that looks very good to me. How about you? If you can see, it's just a nice batter and it's all stirred in. There's no more flour. So I'm going to start putting these into my pan. Now, I like to use a large ice cream scoop for this. And then it perfectly makes nice little round balls. They're all the same size. They cook nice and even. I'm going to take that a little extra off. And as you can see, they make nice little balls in there. That's a large ice cream scoop. Hopefully I have enough to fill this up. It looks like I will. I'm going to use my spatula. Make sure I get all of this yumminess. That should be just about perfect for 2 more banana muffins. And if you wanted, you could put half the muffins with the walnuts, and then you could do the other half maybe with chocolate chiplets if your kids would rather chocolate chiplets. Now there's my last scoop, but I am going to clean out the rest of this batter with my spatula. Make sure everything gets into the pan. Why waste it, folks? Why would you leave just a little dribble in? All right, so these go into the oven and they bake for 20 minutes at a 375-degree oven. Actually, there, tuck that down the side. So I'll bring it back when they're done. So what's some back to school recipes that you like to cook for your kids? I'm going to make some Rice Krispie squares and get those onto the channel. And then I like to put half of my batter on the bottom, and then I take chocolate chiplets and I melt them and spread them in the middle, and then I put another layer of the Rice Krispie squares on top, and then they've got a nice sandwich of chocolate in the middle. Or sometimes I put the chocolate on the top like an icing. They don't stay around my kitchen very long when the kids know that those are made, and the grandkids, my goodness. They need to be chopped up and froze and brought out only for lunches. Anyways, I'll bring you back when these muffins have made perfectly 12 muffins, and they should be very nice and tasty. As you can see, my recipe, that smudged blue, that's my recipe. That's that well used. You know when you've got a good recipe when you can't read it in your book. That's for sure. So just to recap the measurements, there's 3 large bananas, half a cup of sugar, 1 egg, half a teaspoon of salt, 1/3 cup of melted butter or very, very soft butter. Then you put in your 1½ cups of flour. Then I add my 1 teaspoon of baking powder, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, and then I lightly stir in all those ingredients, and I kind of just lightly stir them so that they're not whipped with a beater. You have to go slow and just do it until it's all moist. Then I use my large ice cream scoop, and I make perfect sized muffins and put them in my pans. I grease the pan. Even though that was a non-stick pan, I still give it a light greasing, and I grease across the top of the pan so that if any of them rise up and go over the edge, they won't stick. And I just give basically whatever's on my hand, the residue of the grease, I just take that and put it across the top of the pan. Many times that has saved me from having muffins stuck. Just a little tip. All right, let's test these and see if they're done. Let that rush of hot air come out. Yep, they spring back. So let's take these out. Well, look at how uniform those muffins all are. We're going to let them cool for a few seconds and then we'll take them out. I don't want them to rip and tear and stick to the bottom of my pan. Even though they're lightly greased, ask me how I know that they can rip and tear. Patience is a virtue. If you can eat something naturally and it helps you, why would you take a pill? I take the odd time an omega-3. Or you can eat some walnuts. Pretty easy choice. I enjoy walnuts. Anyways, we'll let these cool down before I do a taste test. And we'll see if we can enjoy them together. Another thing I like to do with my banana muffins when they come out of the oven and they're still a little bit warm is I make a little bit, 1/4 cup of icing sugar, 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla, and about 1/2 teaspoon of water. And if you just dunk it in like that, it gives a nice little glaze. And then put a few pieces of walnut on it and it'll stick. And then you've got a nicely decorated icing muffin. Just adds a little bit of extra boost to them. And then add a few walnuts. And they stick because it's like a little glaze. They're delish. And if you do that while they're still warm, not fresh out of the oven, they've got to cool a little bit because otherwise they can kind of tear because they're kind of delicate. And just put a few walnuts on. And it just elevates it if you want them for company. It just makes it a little bit nicer looking. But only do it when they're fresh out of the oven after they've cooled for a minute or so. Anyways, thanks for watching. Maybe we'll cut one while it's still warm. And we'll put our butter on. Do you put butter on your banana muffins or any muffin for that matter? Some people just can't eat it unless it's got the butter on. Anyways, we'll put a nice little bit on. We'll let that melt into the muffin. And we'll enjoy. Look at that nice walnut. Do you want a bite? Here, you have the first bite. You want the butter or you want the walnut? Maybe we'll move the butter over on the walnut. There you go. Oh. So good. Kids' lunches. Taking them to the office for your lunch, having a coffee break snack, any way you want to cut it, this banana recipe is the bomb. If you make it, share with me what you think of it and what your family thinks. I'm always interested. To me, this is the best ever banana muffin recipe. You'll never change if you use this one. Thanks for watching. Blessings to you and your family on this day. Like, share, and subscribe. Bye. Okay, let's see how nicely they come out of the pan. Perfect. Just got to kind of pick around with your fingers. And they come out very nice. Ooh, that might be a tidbit for me. So if your kids cannot take tree nut foods to school, then do not add the walnuts in. See, now this one is sticking just slightly. Okay, we got underneath. So just don't put them in, but if you're allowed to and your kids like the walnuts, they are expensive, but then you're getting a source of omega-3 fatty acids. Sometimes you have to ask yourself, well, if you can benefit from them, not only in flavor, but in health benefits, and a fresh banana, well, I'm going to add them because they're excellent for you and a health benefit.